You took my wife. I'll take your peace.
The phone rang at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, cutting through the silence of my auto shop like a rusty blade. I was elbow deep in the guts of a '98 Camaro, trying to coax life back into its transmission, when my mother's voice crackled through the speaker. "Danny, your wife was at Murphy's Diner again tonight, with that slick-haired fellow in the expensive suit." I wiped my greasy hands on my coveralls and picked up the phone properly. "Mom, you should be sleeping. The doctor said..." "Don't you doctor said me, Daniel Patrick Sullivan. I've got cancer, not cataracts. I know what I saw." My mother, God bless her stubborn Irish soul, had been fighting stage 3 breast cancer for 8 months. The chemo had stolen her hair and 20 pounds, but it hadn't touched her ability to spot trouble from 3 blocks away. In our town of Cedar Falls, population 8,400, that was both a blessing and a curse. "Maybe it was business, Mom. Lisa's been working a lot of real estate deals lately." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Finally, she sighed. "Honey, I didn't raise you to be stupid. That woman was feeding him pie with her own fork. Since when do real estate agents hand-feed their clients?" I set down my wrench and stared at the oil-stained concrete floor of Sullivan's Auto Repair, the shop my father built, the one I'd inherited along with his debts and his reputation for honest work. "I'll handle it, Mom. You better. And Danny? That boy was driving a silver BMW. License plate started with success. What kind of pretentious..." "I get the picture, Mom. Go to bed." After hanging up, I stood there in the fluorescent glare, surrounded by the familiar smell of motor oil and metal shavings. 15 years of marriage to Lisa Hartwell Sullivan, and this was what it had come to. My cancer-stricken mother playing private investigator, while I fixed other people's broken-down dreams. I locked up the shop and drove home through the empty streets of Cedar Falls. Our house sat on Maple Street, a modest 2-story colonial that Lisa had always called temporary. The kitchen light was on, which meant she was either home or wanted me to think she was. She was sitting at the kitchen table in her silk pajamas, laptop open, pretending to work. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, and she'd refreshed her makeup recently. Dead giveaway. "Working late again?" I asked, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "The Morrison property is giving me headaches. The buyers are being difficult about the inspection." She didn't look up from her screen. "Funny. I thought the Morrison place sold last week." Her fingers paused over the keyboard for just a moment. "Different Morrison. There are 3 Morrison properties on my list." "Right. Of course there are." I sat across from her and studied her face. Lisa was beautiful in that polished real estate agent way, all sharp angles and practiced smiles. When we'd met in college, she'd been studying business with dreams of running her own company. Now she worked for Hartwell and Associates, a firm owned by her brother Marcus, selling overpriced houses to people who couldn't really afford them. "How was your day?" she asked, still not meeting my eyes. "Oh, fixed Mrs. Patterson's Buick, replaced a transmission, got a call from my mother about some interesting dinner theater at Murphy's Diner." This time she did look up, and I saw something flicker across her face. Fear? Guilt? Hard to tell with Lisa. She'd perfected the art of emotional poker years ago. "Your mother needs to mind her own business." Maybe, or maybe she's the only one in this family who still cares about the truth. Lisa closed her laptop with a sharp snap. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm tired, and you're acting strange, and my mother saw you sharing pie with some guy in a BMW at 11 o'clock at night." "It was a business dinner that ran late. Marcus set it up." "Marcus, your brother? The one who thinks I'm not good enough for his precious sister? Don't start, Danny." "I'm not starting anything. I'm just trying to understand why my wife is having late-night dinners with men who drive cars worth more than my annual income." She stood up, gathering her laptop and papers. "I don't have to explain every aspect of my job to you. Some of us have ambitions beyond fixing carburetors for the rest of our lives." The words hit like a slap, but I kept my voice level. "Some of us also honor our wedding vows." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means good night, Lisa." She stormed upstairs, and I heard our bedroom door slam. I finished my beer in the quiet kitchen, staring at the refrigerator covered with photos from better times. Our wedding, vacations, Christmas mornings with our daughter Emma before she left for college. At midnight, I went upstairs. Lisa was already asleep, or pretending to be. I brushed my teeth and slipped into bed, listening to her carefully controlled breathing. In 15 years of marriage, I'd learned to recognize the difference between real sleep and performance sleep. This was definitely a performance. I lay there in the dark, thinking about silver BMWs and late-night dinners and my mother's warning. Lisa had been distant for months, working longer hours, taking mysterious phone calls, buying new clothes and perfume. I'd chalked it up to stress, maybe a midlife crisis. Now I wondered if I'd been willfully blind. At 2 a.m., Lisa's phone buzzed on her nightstand. She reached for it immediately, too immediately for someone who'd been asleep. "Sorry," she whispered, sliding out of bed. "Emergency with a client." She padded to the bathroom with her phone, closing the door softly. I heard the murmur of her voice through the thin walls, but couldn't make out words. The conversation lasted 10 minutes. When she came back to bed, I pretended to be asleep. She settled beside me, but I could feel her tension like electricity in the air. "Everything okay?" I mumbled, playing the part of the drowsy husband. "Fine. Just work stuff." "At 2 in the morning? Real estate doesn't keep bankers' hours, Danny. You wouldn't understand." And there it was again. That subtle dismissal, the implication that my blue-collar life was somehow less important than her white-collar aspirations. I'd been hearing variations of it for years, but tonight it felt different. Tonight it felt like ammunition. I waited until her breathing evened out for real this time, then slipped out of bed and downstairs to my home office. Lisa had left her purse on the kitchen counter, and her backup phone, the one she thought I didn't know about, was tucked in the side pocket. I discovered the second phone 3 months ago while looking for aspirin in her purse. When I'd asked about it, she'd claimed it was for work, a way to separate business calls from personal ones. At the time, I'd believed her. Now I powered it on with shaking fingers. The screen lit up with a dozen unread messages, all from a contact labeled T. The most recent one, sent 20 minutes ago, made my blood run cold. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. That husband of yours has no idea how lucky he is. Or how stupid." I scrolled through the conversation history, my stomach churning with each message. Photos, plans for secret meetings, explicit details about their affair, and worst of all, their mocking commentary about me. "He actually believes I'm working late," Lisa had written. "Sometimes I think he wants to be deceived." "Poor fool," T had replied. "At least he's useful for paying your bills while I take care of everything else." I sat there in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, reading about my wife's betrayal in real time, feeling something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. This wasn't just infidelity. It was contempt. They weren't just having an affair, they were laughing at me. I scrolled further back and found a photo T had sent. A selfie of him in his BMW, silver. Just like my mother had said with that ridiculous Success One license plate. He was handsome in a generic Ken doll way, with perfect teeth and styled hair, and the kind of confident smirk that came from never having to work with your hands. His name was Trent Morrison, the same Morrison whose property Lisa claimed was giving her headaches. I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and went back upstairs. Lisa was sleeping peacefully now, probably dreaming about her exciting double life. I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, feeling the last 15 years of my life rearrange themselves into a new, uglier pattern. By morning, I'd made my decision. If Lisa wanted to play games, I'd play along, but I'd be playing by my rules now, and I'd make sure I won. I woke up at 6 a.m. to an empty bed and the sound of Lisa's shower running. She emerged 20 minutes later, wrapped in a towel, humming softly to herself. She seemed lighter somehow, as if her midnight phone call had lifted some invisible weight from her shoulders. "You're up early," she said, selecting clothes from her walk-in closet with unusual care. "Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about what you said last night." She paused, a silk blouse halfway off its hanger. "What did I say? About ambition? About some of us wanting more than fixing carburetors forever?" "Danny, I didn't mean—" "No, you're right. Maybe it's time I thought bigger." She turned to study my face, trying to read my expression. I kept it neutral, even managed a small smile. "What are you thinking?" "Maybe I should expand the shop, take on more commercial accounts. Hell, maybe I should even buy a decent car instead of driving that 10-year-old pickup." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise? Relief? "That sounds wonderful, honey. I could help you with the business planning if you want." "I'd like that. We should talk more about our futures. Both of our futures." She smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. It made what I was planning feel both easier and harder at the same time. After she left for work, I called my old friend Benny Rodriguez at his boxing gym. Benny had been my trainer back in high school when I'd had dreams of fighting professionally. Now he ran Rodriguez Boxing Academy and served as the unofficial therapist for half the men in Cedar Falls. Danny boy, what's got you calling before 8 a.m.? Your wife finally kicked you out. Not yet, but we might be heading that direction. Ah, crap. Come down to the gym. We'll talk. Rodriguez Boxing Academy occupied a converted warehouse on the wrong side of Cedar Falls, where the rent was cheap and the clientele was honest. Benny had transformed the cavernous space into something between a gym and a sanctuary. Heavy bags hung from the ceiling like leather fruit. Speed bags rattled their staccato rhythms, and the smell of sweat and determination permeated everything. I found Benny in his office, a glass-walled cube overlooking the main floor. He was 62 years old, built like a fire hydrant, with hands that could crack walnuts and a heart soft enough to train kids for free. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "Feel worse. Got any coffee?" He poured 2 cups of something that could strip paint and settled back in his chair. "Talk to me." I told him everything. The phone calls, the secret messages, the late-night meetings. Benny listened without interruption, his weathered face growing darker with each detail. "How long you think this has been going on?" he asked when I finished. "Based on the messages? At least 6 months, maybe longer. And you're sure it's not just emotional? Maybe they haven't." "Benny, I've seen the photos. Trust me, they've crossed every line there is to cross." He was quiet for a long moment, watching a young fighter work the heavy bag through his office window. "What do you want to do about it?" "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to confront her, demand an explanation. Part of me wants to pack her bags and change the locks. And the other part?" I met his eyes. "The other part wants to make them both pay." Benny nodded slowly. "I get that. Question is, what kind of man do you want to be when this is over?" "I want to be the kind of man who doesn't get played for a fool." "Fair enough, but Danny, listen to me. Whatever you do, don't do anything stupid. Don't give them ammunition to use against you. Be smart about this." I spent an hour at the gym, working out my frustration on the heavy bag until my knuckles were raw and my shirt was soaked with sweat. The physical exertion helped clear my head, and by the time I left, I had the beginnings of a plan. Step 1 was gathering evidence. Not just the text messages, but documentation of Lisa's lies, her secret meetings, her financial deceptions. If this was going to end in divorce court, I wanted to be prepared. Step 2 was learning more about Trent Morrison. Who was he? How had he met Lisa? What kind of man seduces another man's wife and then mocks the husband behind his back? Step 3 would depend on what I discovered in steps 1 and 2. I drove to the Cedar Falls Public Library, a Carnegie building that had been serving the community since 1908. The head librarian, Mrs. Chen, had helped me research everything from car repair manuals to my daughter's school projects over the years. "Danny Sullivan, how's your mother doing with her treatments?" "Fighting the good fight, Mrs. Chen. Listen, I need to use one of your computers for some research, something I'd rather not do at home or the shop." She led me to a terminal in the back corner, away from prying eyes. "Take all the time you need." I started with social media, searching for Trent Morrison in Cedar Falls and surrounding areas. I found him quickly. He wasn't exactly trying to hide. His Facebook profile showed a life of aggressive prosperity, expensive restaurants, luxury cars, vacation photos from places I'd never been able to afford. According to his LinkedIn profile, he was a business development consultant who specialized in maximizing synergistic opportunities for forward-thinking enterprises. In other words, he was the kind of guy who used a lot of words to say nothing at all. He'd moved to Cedar Falls 8 months ago from Chicago, renting a high-end apartment in the new Riverside Commons development, the same development where Lisa had been the listing agent for several units. That's how they'd met. She'd shown him apartments, and he decided to sample more than just the local real estate. I dug deeper, using search engines and public records databases. What I found was interesting. Trent Morrison had a pattern. He'd lived in 4 different cities over the past 5 years, always staying just long enough to establish himself before moving on. In each city, he'd been involved with married women, usually women with money or connections. In Phoenix, he'd had an affair with a city councilwoman that ended her marriage and nearly destroyed her career. In Denver, he'd seduced the wife of a prominent attorney, leading to a messy divorce that made the local papers. In Kansas City, he'd been involved with 3 different married women simultaneously. Trent Morrison wasn't just an adulterer. He was a professional homewrecker. I printed out everything I could find and stuffed the papers into a manila folder. Then I drove across town to Riverside Commons, a gleaming complex of condos and apartments designed to attract young professionals who wanted to live somewhere more sophisticated than Cedar Falls typically offered. The leasing office was staffed by a perky blonde who couldn't have been more than 25. Her nameplate read, Brittany. Hi, are you interested in viewing one of our units? Actually, I'm trying to get in touch with one of your residents. Trent Morrison? He's been working with my wife on some business deals, and I wanted to surprise him with some information he's been waiting for. Oh, Mr. Morrison, he's in Unit 4B. Such a nice man, always so charming. I'll bet he is, I thought. Is he home now, do you know? I saw him leave about an hour ago, driving that gorgeous BMW of his, but he usually gets back around 5. Perfect. I'll try him then. Thanks, Brittany. I spent the rest of the afternoon back at my shop, going through the motions of running a business while my mind churned with possibilities. Around 4:30, I drove back to Riverside Commons and parked where I could see the entrance to the complex. At 5:15, the silver BMW with the Success 1 license plate pulled into the parking lot. Trent Morrison stepped out of his car like he was posing for a magazine cover, tall, lean, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people in Cedar Falls made in a month. He moved with the confidence of a man who'd never been punched in the face, never had to worry about making rent, never had to explain to his wife why the checking account was empty. I watched him walk into the building, then waited another 10 minutes before following. The lobby was all marble and mirrors, designed to impress people who equated expensive with important. I took the elevator to the 4th floor and found Unit 4B. The door was solid oak with a brass nameplate that read T. Morrison in elegant script. I pressed my ear to the wood and heard movement inside, footsteps, the sound of a television, the clink of ice in a glass. I knocked. The footsteps approached the door, paused. Who is it? Building maintenance. We've had reports of a water leak from this unit. The door opened, and I found myself face to face with the man who was sleeping with my wife. Up close, he was even more generic than his photos suggested, like someone had ordered a handsome man from a catalog and received the basic model. I haven't noticed any leaks, he said, frowning. They're not always obvious. Mind if I take a quick look around? He hesitated, and I could see him trying to decide if this was legitimate or some kind of scam. Finally, his natural arrogance won out. I suppose, but make it quick. I'm expecting someone. I'll bet you are, I thought, stepping into his apartment. The place was a shrine to conspicuous consumption. Leather furniture, abstract art, a sound system that probably cost more than my truck. Everything was designed to impress, to announce that Trent Morrison was a man of substance and sophistication. Nice place, I said, walking toward the kitchen. You must do pretty well for yourself. I can't complain. What exactly are you looking for? Water damage, stains on the ceiling, warped flooring, that kind of thing. I opened a few cabinets, pretending to inspect the plumbing while actually cataloging the apartment's layout. I really haven't noticed anything, Trent said, checking his expensive watch. How much longer is this going to take? Just a few more minutes. You said you were expecting someone? A business associate. We have a dinner meeting. Local? You could say that. He smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. I'm in the process of acquiring some local assets. I'll bet you are, you fool. I finished my fake inspection and headed for the door. Everything looks good. Thanks for your cooperation, Mr. Morrison. No problem. Always happy to help. As I waited for the elevator, I heard his door close and the sound of the deadbolt engaging. Through the thin walls, I could hear him moving around the apartment, probably getting ready for his evening with my wife. I drove home with my jaw clenched and my hands gripping the steering wheel hard enough to leave marks. Lisa's car wasn't in the driveway yet, but it would be soon. She'd come home, shower, change clothes, and then announce that she had to work late again. And I'd smile and kiss her goodbye and tell her to drive safely. But this time, I'd be ready for her. Lisa arrived home at 6:30, carrying a bouquet of her own guilt in the form of takeout from my favorite Chinese restaurant. I thought we could have a nice dinner together, she said, unpacking containers of sweet and sour pork and beef lo mein. We haven't done that in a while. That's thoughtful of you. I opened 2 beers and handed her one. What's the occasion? Do I need an occasion to have dinner with my husband? No, but you usually have one anyway. She shot me a look but didn't take the bait. We ate in relative silence, making small talk about her work, my mother's health, Emma's progress at college. It felt like a performance, both of us playing the roles of a happily married couple while knowing the script was about to change. At 7:30, right on schedule, her phone buzzed. "Damn," she said, glancing at the screen. "I have to meet a client tonight. The Hendersons are flying back to California tomorrow, and they want to put in an offer on the Riverside property." "The Riverside property? One of the new condos. They saw it this afternoon and fell in love." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "That's great, honey. Big commission?" "Could be, but it means I'll be out late again." "No problem. I'll probably head over to Benny's gym anyway. Haven't been getting enough exercise lately." She smiled, and I could see the relief in her eyes. "That sounds good. You've been under a lot of stress." "You have no idea." She went upstairs to change, and I cleaned up the dinner dishes while listening to her move around our bedroom. 20 minutes later, she came back down wearing a black dress I'd never seen before and perfume that definitely wasn't for the Hendersons. "How do I look?" she asked, doing a little turn. "Beautiful. You always do." She kissed my cheek, and I caught a whiff of her perfume mixed with anticipation. "I'll try not to wake you when I get home. Drive safely." I watched her pull out of the driveway, then waited exactly 10 minutes before following. Lisa drove across town to Riverside Commons just as I'd expected. I parked on the street with a clear view of the building entrance and settled in to wait. At 8:45, she emerged from the lobby with Trent Morrison. They walked to his BMW hand in hand like teenagers on a date. He opened her door for her, such a gentleman, and they drove off toward the expensive part of town. I followed at a distance, my truck's anonymous bulk making it easy to stay hidden in traffic. They ended up at Chez Laurent, the fanciest restaurant in Cedar Falls, the kind of place that charged $30 for a steak and acted like they were doing you a favor. I parked across the street and watched them through the restaurant's large windows. They were seated at a corner table, intimate and cozy, sharing appetizers and laughing at each other's jokes. Trent kept reaching across the table to touch Lisa's hand, and she kept letting him. My wife was glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. She looked happy, animated, alive in a way that made me realize how dead she'd been at home. The knowledge hit me like a physical blow. Not just that she was cheating, but that she was genuinely happier with him than she'd ever been with me. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, watching my marriage dissolve in real time through a restaurant window. When they finally left, they were holding hands again, walking slowly like they didn't want the evening to end. They drove back to Trent's apartment, and this time I didn't follow. I already knew how this story ended. Instead, I drove to Benny's gym. The main floor was closed, but I had a key to the back entrance, a privilege Benny extended to a few trusted friends who needed a place to work out their demons after hours. I spent the next 3 hours knocking the hell out of a heavy bag, imagining Trent Morrison's smug face with every punch. By the time I finished, my hands were bloody and my knuckles were swollen, but my head was clearer than it had been in months. I got home at midnight to find Lisa's car already in the driveway. She was in bed, pretending to be asleep again, but I could smell the shower gel and see the damp towel in the hamper. "How was your evening?" I asked quietly. "Fine," she mumbled. "The Hendersons put in an offer. Should be a good sale." "That's great, honey. I'm proud of you." She rolled over to face me, and in the dim light from the hallway, I could see surprise in her eyes. "Really? Really, you work hard. You deserve success." "Thank you, Danny. That means a lot. I love you, Lisa. I hope you know that. I love you too." The lie came so easily to her that I almost believed it myself. The next morning, I called in sick to the shop and drove to my lawyer's office. Tom Bradley had handled my father's estate and various business matters over the years. He was honest, thorough, and discreet, exactly what I needed. "Danny, good to see you. How's your mother doing?" "Fighting hard. Tom, I need to talk to you about something sensitive." His expression grew serious. "What's going on?" I told him about Lisa's affair, showed him printouts of the text messages and photos I'd managed to capture from her phone. Tom listened without judgment, taking notes and asking practical questions. "What do you want to do?" he asked when I finished. "I want to protect myself. Financially, legally, whatever it takes." Smart thinking. Iowa's a no-fault divorce state, but infidelity can still affect property division and alimony, especially if we can prove she's been using marital assets to support the relationship. "What kind of evidence do you need?" "Credit card statements, bank records, receipts, documentation of her lies about where she's been and what she's been doing. The more the better." I can get that. Good. In the meantime, I'd recommend opening your own bank account and starting to separate your finances. Don't do anything dramatic yet, but protect yourself. I spent the rest of the day setting up a new checking account and having my paychecks redirected. I also installed a GPS tracker on Lisa's car, not to spy on her, but to document her lies about where she was going. That evening, Lisa announced another late meeting. The Morrison account is getting complicated, she said. I might be out until midnight. The Morrison account? Different Morrison. There are several properties involved. Right, of course. This time I didn't follow her. Instead, I used the time to search through her home office, photographing documents and copying files to a flash drive. What I found was worse than I'd expected. Lisa had been using our joint credit cards to pay for her affair, dinners, hotel rooms, gifts for Trent, even a weekend trip to Chicago that she'd claimed was a real estate conference. She'd spent over $8,000 of our money on her betrayal. But the financial infidelity was nothing compared to what I found in her email. She'd been corresponding with her brother Marcus about me, discussing ways to push me out of my own business. Marcus owned several commercial properties in town, and he'd been pressuring his tenants to take their automotive needs elsewhere. Lisa had been feeding him information about my finances, my client list, even my mother's medical expenses. They weren't just having an affair behind my back. They were actively working to destroy my livelihood. The final piece of evidence was a real estate contract hidden in the back of Lisa's filing cabinet. She'd been working with Trent to purchase the building that housed my auto shop, planning to triple my rent and force me out of business. I sat in her office at 11 p.m., surrounded by the documentation of my wife's betrayal, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a coordinated attack on everything I'd built, everything my father had left me. Lisa wanted to destroy my life so she could start fresh with her new boyfriend. Well, two could play that game. I spent the next week gathering evidence and planning my response. I documented every lie, every secret meeting, every dollar she'd stolen from our joint accounts. I researched Trent Morrison's background more thoroughly, uncovering his pattern of targeting married women in every city he'd lived in. Most importantly, I started reaching out to people, not to expose Lisa's affair, but to build a network of allies for what was coming. The first person I called was Emma, our daughter. She was a junior at Iowa State, studying business like her mother, but with more integrity than both her parents combined. Dad, is everything okay? You sound weird. I need to tell you something, sweetheart, about your mother and me. I explained the situation as gently as I could, focusing on the facts rather than my emotions. Emma listened in shocked silence. I can't believe Mom would do this, she said finally. Are you sure? I'm sure, baby. I'm sorry you have to know about it. What are you going to do? I'm going to handle it, but I wanted you to hear it from me first before things get complicated. Do you want me to come home? Not yet, but soon maybe. I love you, Emma. I love you too, Dad. I'm so sorry this is happening. The next call was to my mother. She was in the middle of a chemo cycle, weak and nauseous, but her mind was sharp as ever. I knew that woman was no good, she said after I'd explained everything. What can I do to help? Just be ready, Mom. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. Good. I've been waiting for you to grow a backbone about that wife of yours. The third call was the hardest. I dialed the number for Hartwell and Associates and asked to speak with Marcus Hartwell. Danny, good to hear from you. How's business? Actually, Marcus, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I think we need to have a conversation about some mutual interests. Oh, what kind of interests? The kind that involve your sister, her boyfriend, and their plans for my auto shop. The silence on the other end was deafening. I think we should meet, Marcus said finally. I think we should too. Tomorrow noon at Murphy's Diner. And Marcus, come alone. I hung up before he could respond. Everything was in place. The evidence was gathered, the allies were contacted, and the trap was set. Now it was time to spring it.